Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
One of the things people remember to this day from my wedding is not the thing I would expect them to remember. It wasn't my radiant beauty or the lovely venue. No, people remember the cupcakes. And yeah, honestly, they were pretty good. They were from a cupcake bakery that had actually been, I think, on a Food Network competition. Like, they were really, really good. But honestly, thanks, guys. Like, that's what you remember from my wedding. Anyway, one of the things I most remember from my wedding is when the wedding party was introduced at the reception. See, I'd asked the DJ to play something fun and lighthearted, but I guess I didn't say the word upbeat. So I'd given my whole party glow sticks to come in kind of dancing and having fun because I thought it would be an upbeat song, and they all went before us, so I didn't know what was happening out there. But when the doors opened and we walked in dancing, it was actually a slow but very lovely song. And there was definitely just that moment of what's happening right now. Anyway, you remember things from weddings. Certain things will stand out to you. Maybe you're thinking of one right now from a wedding that you've attended or been part of. Hey, it's Jen. This is the Bible for Busy People podcast, and this week we are talking about Bible stories with pretty dramatic plot twists. So the wedding that we are going to talk about today in the Bible was particularly memorable, and not just because it was about a week-long celebration, which was normal at the time. Can you imagine a week-long wedding these days where people would have to take off like a whole week of work and travel and just celebrate and have fun for a whole week for someone's wedding? That just seems incomprehensible to me. Anyway, we are in John chapter 2, where it says, "On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding." So these must have been local friends of the family. Cana was a town in Galilee, and Jesus grew up in Nazareth, which was also in Galilee. In verse 3, it says, "When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, 'They have no more wine.' 'Woman, why do you involve me?' Jesus replied, 'My hour has not yet come.' His mother said to the servants, 'Do whatever he tells you.'" So the groom's family traditionally paid for the wedding feast, and to run out of wine would have meant social humiliation. It meant bad hospitality. It's as if, like, you invited a whole bunch of people to your wedding and you didn't count the costs, you didn't have the right head count, and you ran out of food. It would be so embarrassing for the family, for other people to think that they didn't think it through or they ran out of funds. And this interaction here is so interesting. It sounds almost like Jesus was being rude or abrupt with his mom. I liked Rachel Held Evans's point in her book, Searching for Sunday, that we might understand the context better if we could see facial expressions and hear tone. But at the end of the day, as Rachel says, Jesus listened to his mama. In verse 6, it says, "Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, 'Fill the jars with water.' So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, 'Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet.' They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, 'Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now.'" What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There he stayed for a few days. In this episode of The Chosen, Jesus is speaking with the person who's in charge of the wine for the event, who is freaking out at this point. And again, this was written for the TV show, so it clearly was something that was added and is not in the Bible. But it's interesting the conversation Jesus has with the man, because he asks him, why these ceremonial jars were cut from stone to use for purification. And the man says, well, the stone keeps the water clean and pure. He goes into it a little bit more than that. I don't have it with me. But it makes you think, like Jesus used these jars in particular to turn the water to wine. I thought that was an interesting fact there. And then in that episode, Jesus pauses before he prays to turn the water into wine. And I like that. Again, it was added for the TV show. But I appreciate that because you can imagine how significant this moment was. It was his first miracle. It was the beginning of his ministry. So this was no small thing. And I find it interesting that he chose this to be his first miracle. I don't know if it was because he was listening to his mom, but I think there's a little more to it. And going back to Rachel Held Evans and her book, Searching for Sunday, she says, it may be tempting to dismiss the miracle at Cana as a mere magic trick, an example of Jesus flexing his messianic muscles before getting to the real work of restoring sight to the blind and helping the paralyzed off their mats. But this is only because we have such a hard time believing that God cares about our routine realities, that God's glory resides in the stuff of everyday life, just waiting to be seen. She makes the point that God points to the everyday and says, pay attention. This stuff matters. These things are holy. This is also such a good example that God cares about the things that we care about, which I think speaks to Rachel's point. Jesus didn't brush off the family's humiliation. He didn't brush off his mother's ask and her request as being not important enough for his ministry, especially the very beginning of it. This is just another way that God became embodied and experienced life like we do. He felt empathy. He felt compassion for this family and for his mother. And I just want to use that as a reminder to bring your cares to God, whether it's the test score or the job application or the worries about work or your family or church or about planning your wedding. Last week, one of my kids prayed for help with memorization for a class competition to remember the numbers of digits after pi. Whatever it is, it's not too small. Bring it to God. God cares about the things that we care about. He is generous and abundant with his miracles, and he wants to show up for you. I hope that encourages you for today, and tomorrow we will chat one more time about another story with an interesting plot twist. I just want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Cannon Beach Conference Center. As a fellow busy person, I think I speak for all of us when I say we all could use a break. Cannon Beach Conference Center provides the perfect coastal backdrop for a number of refreshing, restoring, and equipping conferences. And it's also an ideal place to host your church or ministry retreat. Get more details by calling 800-745-1546 or visiting cbcc.net.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.